The first sound was laughter, soft, unguarded, echoing through the marble hall. It didn't belong there, not in a house where silence had always ruled like iron. "Who's in my room?" The man's voice cut through the air, calm but sharp. The young woman froze, a wooden spoon clutched in her hand like a microphone. She turned slowly, the burgundy dress brushing her ankles. Her eyes widened. It was him, the owner, the millionaire no one ever dared to surprise. "Mr. Donovan," she whispered. He didn't move closer, didn't scold. His gaze lingered, not on the dusted shelves or polished glass, but on her. For the first time, he actually saw her. "You were dancing," he said quietly, as if naming a secret. She dropped her eyes, embarrassed. I didn't mean to disrespect your home." A pause, then the unexpected. "Don't stop." Her heart thundered. The silence stretched, heavy yet delicate, like something about to break. And right here, before we go deeper, if this moment already pulls you in, if you feel the tension rising, don't miss what comes next. If you enjoy it, subscribe and leave a comment. If you don't, then at least press like. The room itself seemed to shift. The millionaire's voice had never carried warmth, but now it did. The maid's face burned with shame, yet something brighter flickered in her eyes. Hope or danger. Neither of them could name it yet. Upstairs, the chandelier caught the golden light of afternoon. Downstairs, the radio still hummed a song meant for no audience, and in that fleeting instant, two lives on opposite ends of the world's ladder found themselves colliding. And this was only the beginning. The morning after the dance, the mansion seemed unchanged on the surface. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandelier still held the same cold brilliance. The silence still sat like a weight on every corner. And yet, for her, for him, everything had shifted in ways no one else could see. Elena woke before the alarm, as always. She bathed in cold water, tied her hair into a neat bun, and slipped into the stiff black uniform. It pressed against her shoulders like armor, a reminder that she was here not as herself, but as the help. She tied her apron tightly, whispering under her breath the same prayer she'd whispered every day. "Just one more day, Lord. Just help me through one more day." But as she looked at her reflection in the cracked mirror, something felt different. The girl staring back wasn't only a servant anymore. She had glimpsed herself in the burgundy dress, twirling free under golden light. And once you've seen freedom, even for a second, it never quite lets you go. Downstairs, the millionaire was already at his desk. Miles Donovan, the man whose name filled headlines, whose face appeared on glossy covers, was bent over his laptop, eyes hidden behind black-rimmed glasses. He looked like stone, as always. But inside, a storm had started. The memory of her barefoot dance refused to fade. The sound of her laugh, so light yet so full, had followed him into his dreams. For months, he had walked past her like she didn't exist. A shadow, a silence. But yesterday, that shadow had burst into color, and now he could not unsee it. Elena entered the study quietly, carrying his morning coffee. Her steps were small, careful, the way years of surviving had taught her to move. She placed the tray gently on the polished wood. "Your coffee, sir." For the first time, he looked up. Their eyes met. "Thank you, Elena." Her name, spoken softly. Not you, not the maid. Her name. She froze, her heart stumbling. It was such a small thing, yet for her it felt monumental, like being pulled from shadows into light. "You're welcome, sir," she managed, voice trembling. He lingered on her face a second longer than usual. Then the silence returned, but this time it wasn't cold. It was charged, fragile, alive. After serving breakfast, Elena returned to her duties. She scrubbed glass, dusted frames, and folded towels with the precision of someone who had learned invisibility as survival. Yet every so often she caught herself hearing his voice again. Elena, like it mattered. She paused once in the hallway, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The dark circles beneath her eyes, the faint lines of exhaustion, were those still hers? Or had something begun to shift? "Don't be foolish," she whispered to herself. It was nothing. But deep inside, something small and stubborn whispered back, Maybe it was everything. Upstairs, Miles tried to return to his work. The numbers blurred. The contracts felt hollow. His empire, built on code and concrete, suddenly seemed less real than the image of a young woman spinning in sunlight, singing into a wooden spoon as though it were a microphone. He set his laptop aside and leaned back in his chair. For years, his fiancée's voice had filled this house. Sharp, demanding, proud. But yesterday it was Alina's laughter that had filled the air, and the house, for once, had felt alive. He closed his eyes. In that silence, he realized something unsettling. He wanted to hear it again. By late afternoon, Alina slipped into the laundry room with a basket of linens. As she folded each one, her fingers trembled slightly. She thought of her mother, the woman in the faded photograph she kept beneath her pillow. Her mother had dreamed she would become a teacher, a woman of knowledge, not a servant in someone else's house. But dreams had died quickly when illness came, when bills piled high, when love was buried too soon. The burgundy dress had been Alina's only rebellion, her way of holding on to a piece of the girl she might have been. And yesterday, that dress had changed everything. She pressed her hand against the fabric now, remembering the way his eyes softened, remembering how, for the first time, she had not been invisible. That evening, the mansion was unusually quiet. No sharp commands, no raised voices, just the hum of electricity and the faint ticking of the clock. Alina carried a tray of tea into the living room, expecting silence to greet her as always. But instead, Miles was there, without his suit jacket, without the distance of his usual coldness. He looked almost human. "You don't have to call me sir every time," he said suddenly. She blinked, startled. "It's out of respect." He gave a faint smile, one corner of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "Respect doesn't always have to sound so formal." Her fingers tightened around the tray. She didn't know how to respond. So she nodded quickly and turned to leave. But his voice stopped her at the doorway. "About yesterday," he said. Her breath caught. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I saw something I hadn't seen before. You looked happy." Free, his eyes met hers. "I like seeing that side of you." The words pierced her chest. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "It won't happen again, I promise." "I didn't say that," he replied softly. "Maybe it should." For a moment, the silence between them was electric, fragile, but alive. Then footsteps echoed from the hallway, breaking the moment. A delivery man. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, but neither of them felt ordinary anymore. The next morning, Miles appeared in the hallway with 2 cups of coffee. She was polishing the frames when he stopped near her. "You look like you could use a break," he said, offering 1 cup. Alina stared at it, startled. "For me?" He nodded. "Yes, for you." Their fingers brushed as she took it. The smallest touch, but enough to make her heart skip. They sat in silence, sipping side by side. For once, it wasn't the silence of absence, but of presence. "You don't talk much," she murmured. "Neither do you," he answered. A soft smile tugged at her lips. "I guess we both got used to being quiet." He looked at her then, more directly than ever. "Maybe it's time we stop." And for the first time, she laughed, genuine, unafraid. He listened as though it were the rarest sound he had ever known. But peace never lasts. Just as Alina began to believe silence could turn gentle, the sound of wheels rolling across marble announced a storm's return. The fiancée, with her bags, her heels, her voice sharp as knives. And though Alina bowed her head, clutching her apron, she felt the fragile thread of hope trembling inside her chest. Because for the first time, she was not entirely afraid. The rain had stopped by dawn. The mansion was quiet, but not with the old kind of silence. This time it was different. Alive, fragile, waiting. Alina woke earlier than usual, her body moving through chores out of habit, but her heart not as heavy. She could still hear his words from the night before. "You're not invisible." For the first time in 8 months, she allowed herself to wonder, what if he truly meant it? Morning light spilled into the dining room. Donovan sat at the long table, laptop open but untouched. His fiancée Ava had returned to the city the night before, but had left again early, claiming business meetings. The house felt suspended between storms. When Alina entered with a tray, Donovan glanced up. Their eyes met briefly. Good morning, he said. Her heart raced. Good morning, sir. He paused, corrected himself. Donovan, just Donovan. She blinked, unsure how to respond, then gave the smallest nod. It was nothing more than 2 words, but in this house, where her presence had been swallowed by silence for months, it felt like thunder. Yet peace never lasts long. By midday, Ava's sharp heels clicked across the marble floor once more. Her perfume, heavy and commanding, preceded her voice. Where's Donovan? And why does this place smell like lavender? Alina's hands tightened on the cleaning rag. Ava was back, and storms never announced themselves politely. Upstairs, Ava flung open drawers, inspecting every corner as though the house itself had betrayed her. She paused in the guest room, where Alina had folded linens. On the side table lay the burgundy dress again, carefully pressed and set aside. Ava's eyes narrowed. She lifted it between 2 manicured fingers, sneering. This little thing again? Alina, standing in the doorway, froze. It's mine, ma'am. I washed it after parading around in it while I was gone. Ava cut her off, her voice laced with venom. Do you honestly think a scrap of fabric changes who you are? A maid is still a maid. Alina lowered her eyes, but not quickly enough. Ava saw the flicker of something, dignity, strength, maybe even defiance. It was enough to ignite her fury. You wore this in front of him, didn't you? Hoping he'd notice you. Ava's voice climbed. Pathetic. Her hand rose again, sharp and trembling. For a heartbeat, Alina thought history would repeat itself. But this time, she lifted her chin, voice trembling, yet steady. You don't have to see me, but I see myself. The words shocked even her, and for the first time, Ava hesitated. The sound of footsteps broke the tension. Donovan appeared in the hall, suitcase still in hand from a trip downtown. His eyes moved from Ava's raised hand to the burgundy dress dangling like evidence, then to Alina's trembling figure. Ava, he said quietly. She dropped her hand, but not her anger. I was reminding your maid of her place. Donovan's jaw tightened. You don't raise your hand in my house. She's getting too comfortable, Ava snapped. Dancing in dresses, acting like she belongs here. She does, Donovan interrupted, his voice calm but sharper than steel. The air froze. Ava's lips parted in disbelief. You're defending her? I'm asking you to respect her, he replied evenly. Something you've long forgotten how to do. Ava's face flushed red. So that's what this is? You've fallen for her? The accusation hung heavy in the air. Alina's breath caught, her chest tight. Donovan didn't answer immediately. He looked at Alina instead, his eyes steady, unashamed. And in that silence, Ava had her answer. That evening, the mansion became a battlefield of whispers and slammed doors. Ava stormed into the study, confronting Donovan with a fury that shook the chandeliers. She is using you, Ava spat. These girls always do. They play helpless, waiting for men like you to rescue them. Donovan stood at the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection fractured by the glass. No, Ava, she isn't using anyone. You are. Her laugh was sharp, humorless. You'll regret this. The board, the press, they won't stomach a scandal. A millionaire and his maid? It's a headline that will ruin you. For the first time, Donovan turned fully toward her, his voice low but firm. Then let it ruin me? Because I'd rather be ruined with honesty than live another day in a lie with you. Ava staggered back, struck not by volume, but by conviction. She packed that night, her heels stabbing the floor with each furious step, and by dawn the next day she was gone, her absence leaving an echo behind, but not peace. Though Ava's departure should have been a relief, it wasn't. Alina felt the weight of it like a noose tightening. Rumors traveled fast in wealthy circles. The staff whispered, the city gossiped, and she, caught in the center, felt exposed. She avoided Donovan as best she could, moving like a shadow once more. But he noticed. One evening, he found her in the laundry room, folding towels with trembling hands. You've been quiet, he said. She forced a smile. That's my job. No, he corrected gently. Your job is to work. Quiet is something you learn to survive. Her fingers froze on the fabric. For a moment she wanted to believe him, but fear was louder. You don't understand, she whispered. They'll never accept it. People like me don't get endings like this. Donovan's voice softened. Maybe it's time we write a new ending. Days later, he asked her to share a meal, not in secret, not in shadows, but at the grand dining table where only Ava once sat. At first she refused, but that evening, when she entered the room, the table was already set. A single candle flickered between two plates of stew, simple but warm. Donovan wasn't in a suit. He wore a plain navy shirt. This house has felt empty for too long, he said. Let's fill it differently tonight. They ate in silence at first, then laughter crept in, hesitant, fragile, real. He told her stories of markets and lost directions, and she teased him about his clumsy way of slicing onions. For a moment, the mansion wasn't a cage, it was a home. Later, when music drifted softly from the speaker, he stood awkwardly. You never finished that dance, he murmured. Her heart raced. You want me to dance again? No, he said gently, extending a hand. I want to dance with you. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. They moved slowly, clumsily, yet perfectly. And when she rested her head against his chest, both of them understood. This was no longer about pity or rebellion or scandal. It was about being seen. But outside those walls, the world was sharpening its knives. Headlines waited to be written, eyes waited to judge, and neither of them knew that the true storm had yet to come. Because love born in silence is fragile, and to survive it must face the noise of the world. The candlelight had barely faded from their first dinner when the world outside began to whisper. By morning, it was no longer whispers, it was headlines. Millionaire Donovan Hale seen dining with housemaid. Engagement broken? Another woman in the picture? The newspapers loved it. The blogs spread it faster. The photos weren't intimate, but they were enough. A grainy shot of Donovan and Alina at the dining table. The soft glow of a single candle between them. When the article reached the boardroom of Hale Technologies, the directors erupted. This is a disaster, one barked. Investors will panic. Our image is on the line. She's a maid, Donovan, another said coldly. Do you understand what that does to perception? Donovan sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes hard. What it does, he said slowly, is remind everyone that perception has nothing to do with truth. The board was stunned. They wanted control. He gave them conviction, and conviction is dangerous. At the mansion, Alina faced a storm of her own. Ava hadn't just left quietly. She had returned to society circles with venom, feeding rumors. By the second day, paparazzi camped outside the estate gates. When Alina walked to the market one morning, whispers followed. That's her, a woman muttered. She thinks she's better than us now, another hissed. First a maid, now a millionaire's toy. The words sliced through her. She lowered her head, clutching the basket tighter. But her steps slowed when she noticed a little girl staring, not with contempt, but awe. The child whispered to her mother, Mama, she looks like a queen. It was enough to keep Alina walking, though her chest ached. That evening, she confronted Donovan. I can't do this, she said, voice breaking. The whole world is laughing at me. At us. They're not laughing, he answered gently. They're afraid. Afraid of what? Of the truth that love isn't theirs to control. Her tears fell, but so did her defenses. The third storm came wearing red silk and venom. Ava barged into the mansion, cameras following her like hungry wolves. She smiled sweetly for the flashes, but once the doors closed, her fury ignited. You've humiliated me, she screamed at Donovan. You've humiliated yourself. And for what? A servant? Alina stood in the hall, trembling, but Donovan stepped forward. This isn't about humiliation, Ava. It's about honesty. Honesty? Ava spat. You call it honesty to throw away everything for her? Your empire? Your reputation? Donovan's voice was low, dangerous. If an empire costs me respect for another human being, then it isn't worth owning. Ava's laugh was jagged, cruel. She turned to Alina. And you? Do you think this will last? You think he'll choose you when the world turns its back? You're nothing, Alina. Nothing. Alina's hands shook, but she lifted her chin. If I'm nothing, then why are you so afraid of me? The silence after was heavier than any scream. Days later, the pressure became unbearable. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. This time, they didn't ask. They demanded. "You will end this farce," the chairman ordered. "Issue a public statement. Distance yourself from her or resign as CEO." Donovan leaned back in his chair, scanning the faces of men who had once admired him, now united against him. His empire, his billions, his legacy, all balanced on this choice. "Do you understand?" the chairman pressed. "One word from you, and this company survives. One refusal, and it collapses." Donovan's reply was calm, but it shook the room. "Then let it collapse. Because a company built on cruelty doesn't deserve to survive." The board erupted. Phones rang, voices rose, threats flew. But Donovan stood, collected his papers, and walked out. The door closed behind him, sealing his choice. That night he found Alina sitting in the garden, the burgundy dress folded across her knees like a memory. She didn't look up as he sat beside her. "You're free now," he said softly. "No board, no chains." I walked away. Her eyes widened. "You gave it up? For me?" "For us," he corrected. "For truth. For the promise I made you, that you are not invisible." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Donovan, I don't deserve..." He touched her hand gently. "You deserve everything. Everything they said you couldn't have." She leaned into him then, not out of weakness, but of strength, the kind that comes from finally being seen. As if fate itself wanted a final test, thunder rolled that evening. Rain lashed against the windows, the sky splitting with fury. But inside the mansion, a different storm raged, a storm of defiance, of love refusing to bow. Music played low, the same song that had once filled the halls when Alina danced alone. Donovan stood, extended his hand once more. "Will you dance with me?" This time she didn't hesitate. She rose, the burgundy dress swirling around her ankles, her bare feet pressing against the marble. Together they moved, not clumsy, not hesitant, but certain. Each step was rebellion. Each turn was defiance. Each breath was love. Outside, the world roared. Inside, two souls carved a sanctuary where power, wealth, and judgment had no place. And when the thunder finally quieted, they were still there, holding on, refusing to let go. But battles never end in one night. The press would not rest. The world would not forgive so easily. Yet something fundamental had shifted, because Donovan Hale, once untouchable millionaire, had chosen humanity over empire. And Alina, once invisible maid, now stood not as shadow, but as equal. The road ahead would be long, lined with doubt and fire. But together they had faced the storm and survived. And survival, when born of dignity and love, is its own kind of victory. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in every corner of the mansion. Rain still clung to the glass windows, and the scent of wet earth drifted through the halls. Alina sat by the fire that night, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea Donovan had made himself. For the first time she wasn't serving, she was being cared for. The next morning, sunlight returned, painting the marble floors in gold. But the world outside hadn't changed its tune. Headlines screamed scandal, investors threatened withdrawal, and Ava's name remained on everyone's lips. Inside, though, a different rhythm pulsed. Alina woke to find Donovan already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, clumsily attempting breakfast. "You'll burn the eggs," she teased softly. "Then we'll eat toast," he replied, smiling faintly. It was a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. For a moment it felt as though the mansion itself had shifted, from prison to home. Yet Alina couldn't escape the weight pressing down on her. Everywhere she turned, reminders of her place in society surfaced. The staff whispered more cautiously now, unsure of how to treat her. When she walked the streets, eyes followed, some with judgment, some with pity, few with kindness. One evening she confessed her fears to Donovan. "They'll never accept me," she whispered. "Not the board, not the city, not the world you belong to." He reached for her hand. "Then we'll build a new world, one where acceptance isn't handed down like charity, but lived in truth." She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Could love truly defy the iron chains of class and reputation? A week later, Donovan suggested they visit the place where his journey had begun, a small orphanage on the edge of the city. "Why here?" she asked, stepping out of the car. "Because this is where I promised myself I'd never be powerless again," he said quietly. Inside, children laughed and played with worn toys. The caretaker recognized Donovan instantly, her eyes softening. "You've grown into a man who kept his vow," she said. Donovan crouched to tie a child's shoe, his usual guarded composure slipping into warmth. Alina watched silently, her heart tightening. For the first time, she saw him not as billionaire or savior, but as boy-turned-man, scarred yet resilient. Later, as they walked through the garden, he asked her softly, "What was your dream before all this?" She hesitated, then admitted, "To become a teacher, to open a small school where children who had nothing could feel like they had everything." He stopped, eyes steady. "Then let's make it real." But peace was fleeting. News broke that Ava was suing Donovan for breach of contract on their broken engagement. She appeared on television, venom wrapped in elegance, painting herself as the victim. "He traded stability for a servant," she told the cameras. "It won't last. It never does." The interviews went viral. Public opinion split sharply. Some ridiculed Donovan, others ridiculed Alina. The cruelty was relentless. That night, Alina locked herself in her room, tears blurring her vision as she stared at the burgundy dress folded neatly on the chair. Once it had made her feel free, now it felt like a target painted on her back. Donovan knocked gently. "Alina, open the door." She did finally, her voice trembling. "Maybe she's right. Maybe this was never meant to last." His eyes softened. He stepped closer. "Don't let her words decide our story. She lost her place because she never knew how to value it. You are my place." The words broke her. For the first time, she wept openly into his chest, letting the wall she had built for years finally fall. Days later, Donovan made an announcement that stunned the city. He called a press conference, not to defend himself, but to tell the truth. "Power means nothing if it demands silence from those with less," he declared. "This woman beside me, Alina, taught me that dignity is not given by wealth. It is lived in every breath, in every act of kindness. If that truth costs me titles, fortune, or legacy, then so be it." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed. Alina stood beside him, trembling but proud. It wasn't just a declaration of love. It was a declaration of war against cruelty, against prejudice, against the idea that worth could be measured in dollars. Weeks turned into months. Donovan, having stepped back from his empire, poured his resources into Alina's dream. Together, they purchased an abandoned building on the edge of the city. Brick by brick, it transformed into something new, a school painted in soft cream and gold, filled with books, laughter, and hope. At the opening ceremony, children from the neighborhood crowded the halls, their eyes wide with wonder. Donovan stood quietly in the background, but Alina stepped forward. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was a leader, a teacher, a beacon. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "This school isn't built on money. It's built on the belief that no child should ever feel unseen, no dream too small, no heart too invisible. Here, you are all visible. Here, you matter." Applause thundered, but what struck deepest were the tears glistening in the eyes of those who once whispered behind her back. They were seeing her now, truly seeing. That evening, after the ceremony, Donovan handed her a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "It's not a ring," he said gently, opening it to reveal a delicate silver necklace. "Not yet, but it's a promise that you will never again be invisible. Not to me, not to anyone who chooses to see the truth." She lifted her hair as he placed it around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. Her eyes shimmered. "I don't need jewels to know I'm seen. I just need you." He smiled, pulling her close. "Then you have me, always." From maid to queen, from silence to voice, from invisibility to light. Alina's journey was never about wealth or status. It was about dignity, about being seen in a world that too often looks away. And as the sun set behind the city skyline, children's laughter echoing from the new school, she knew the truth that had carried her from the shadows. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who change everything. The days that followed the school's opening carried a quiet triumph. The same newspapers that once ridiculed Donovan now printed new headlines. From Fortune to Future, Hail funds school for underprivileged children. Cameras no longer chased scandal. They chased hope. Ava's lawsuit dissolved quietly, her face fading from the spotlight she once craved. The boardroom that had demanded obedience now found itself irrelevant, because Donovan had already walked away. His empire still existed, but he no longer bowed to it. For the first time in years, he was free, and Alina, once the invisible maid, walked the halls of the new school every morning with children tugging at her sleeves, calling her teacher. She was no longer a shadow moving silently through marble corridors. She was the heart of a new story, the kind written not with gold, but with grace. One evening, standing in the garden, where so many tears had fallen, she turned to Donovan. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Leaving it all behind?" He shook his head, smiling faintly. "No empire is worth more than peace. No fortune worth more than love." She leaned against him, whispering, "Then maybe we were never poor at all. Maybe we were just waiting to be seen." The conflict that had once consumed them, class, power, reputation, wasn't erased. The world still whispered, but whispers had lost their power, because the louder truth was standing there in the garden. Love that had endured ridicule, dignity that had survived humiliation, and a promise that neither wealth nor cruelty could erase. And as the sun set, casting a golden light across the school's windows, it was clear. The story was never about a billionaire and a maid. It was about two souls who found the courage to see each other beyond the walls society had built. This story carries a truth that belongs to all of us. Sometimes the ones the world overlooks are the ones destined to change it. Dignity is not given by wealth, but by the courage to stand tall. Love is not reserved for the powerful, but for those who choose to see each other clearly. So to anyone who has ever felt invisible, remember your worth is not defined by where you begin, but by the light you carry within. And sometimes that light is enough to turn a mansion of silence into a home filled with hope. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to hear more stories of dignity, love, and courage, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the stories we tell remind us that we too are seen.